I believe that our job as CFOs is to take cash from investors and put it to work in the business. You're not going to see me ever, making a bunch of Bitcoin bets or playing options at Wall Street bets and stocks go up. That's not why investors give us money. They give us money to put it to work and to grow our core business. I don't think people understand the pain of what happens when the valuation goes down. Let's just say you doubled your valuation. Your 409A probably went up, probably doubled. Now it's probably closer to your prior rounds. And if you want to hire people and they know valuations, multiples just got cut in half, and you say, hey, this equity you're granting me, like that strike price is like barely in the money, maybe not in the money. Like this equity is not worth as much as pot. So new hires, to bring in your new leaders and VPs, harder to bring them in if they know what's going on there. The existing employees are like, hey, my options aren't worth as much if my 409A is up here and 409A is lagging. It takes a while for it to catch up.
Welcome to Turpentine Finance, a podcast where we talk with top founders and finance leaders about what it takes to architect success. Our guests speak candidly about big business inflections, market curveballs, and how they approach decision-making so that you have the tactics and mental models for when the pressure is on. I'm your host, Sasha, founder, CEO, and self-professed finance nerd. You ready? Let's dive in. So one of the really cool things about finance is you can study it as a major in school, you can work in finance as a career, and you can actually lead finance as a CFO of a company that helps other CFOs as their product. There's not many other industries or places where this exists. So I'm excited to introduce Razzak, although you guys have probably heard him before. He's everywhere and amazing, but he's worked at these amazing companies: Synopsys, Adobe, Apple, Lending Club, Looker, which was acquired by Google, until he became CFO of FloQast, which counts Twilio, the Los Angeles Lakers, Zoom, and Snowflake as customers. And a big thank you to Logan from Redpoint for the introduction. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Really excited to be here.
Cool. All right. So to set this up, I want to learn more about how your professional experience shaped your current leadership style as CFO. And then we can start talking about some fun challenges in the role of a CFO. So let's start with, how do you describe the role of a CFO?
I think I described it a little differently than most, but ultimately the CFO is there to help the CEO best execute his or her vision. And so there's a lot of pieces that go into it, a lot of dots that need to be connected, and a lot of things that you need to be able to say no to be able to say yes to the most important ones. And so that is how I view my role as CFO, is helping the company execute its CEO's vision.
Awesome. No argument as a CEO that I love hearing an answer like that. What do you consider your superpowers and why?
I've got two answers to that. I think the most important two things I do, one of them is hiring. I always start with hiring. At the CFO level, you are hiring people that are going to be the trusted advisors of everybody throughout the business. And so getting the right people that can be extremely insightful and accurate, but also build business partner trust and to be their trusted advisor to make the decisions they need to make is really important. So hiring's up there. I wouldn't say I'm perfect at it, but it's certainly one of the things I care most about in my priority list. More specific to myself, I love interacting with experts. And I think in the role of the CFO, you have to be able to do that, because a lot of times what you're doing is you're driving cross-functional initiatives and priorities. And you have to be able to both influence and understand and work with people who are more experts in their area than you are. When you're talking with sales planning and working with the CRO, they know sales better than you do. When you're talking to the CTO and they're talking about their engineering plans, they're the experts in that. Yet you have to be able to have enough understanding of those areas to engage and partner and come to the best solution for the entire company. So my superpower, I don't know if it's a superpower, but I absolutely love working with people that are experts in fields different than myself.
It comes across so naturally. As you think back through some of your career, you've worked at some amazing companies. Any sort of learnings on how you build that trust with different colleagues across different types of cultures and stages of business?
Yeah, so I came up, I have some accounting background, but primarily I came up through FP&A and financial planning. And people often ask me, what was the key to your success as you grew. And it was the ability to partner and influence with people outside of my area expertise. And so when I think about those things, I think about what skills you need to be able to do that. And first, you got to have great technical skills. There's not many great controllers that aren't great at accounting. There's not many great VPs of FP&A that weren't at one time great at spreadsheets and Excel. And so you got to be able to get the data. You've got to be able to quickly process all the data. And then secondly, you've got to be able to learn and understand what your business partners' priorities are and what they're going to teach you how the business works. And if you can combine your business partners' priorities of this is how the business works with your unique insights and better data access and better ability to put things into an ROI model, and then advise your business partners on, hey, this actually will get us to our result faster or better or in a different way, then you become that trusted advisor of your business partner. And then you're working cross-functionally. And for me, that was fun. Like I love spreadsheets. I shout out to anybody who's ever watched the YouTube videos on the Excel World Championships. I wasn't that good, but there's some craziness out there. But being able to combine your technical skills with your, some people call them people skills, I would call them business skills, the ability to understand things beyond just finance and accounting is really critical.
So when you think about building that rapport with business partners and colleagues in order to accomplish the jobs to be done, a lot of the perception of finance is kind of a no or like a budget sort of czar. How do you work through those in order to build trust with your colleagues?
Yeah, I mean, if all you're doing, let's use FP&A for an example. If all you're doing is tracking someone's budget and their forecast versus it, you're just going to be the office of no. If that's all you're doing, that's the only thing people are going to come to you for. However, if you're driving more insights on, hey, I've looked at your whole business, I've talked to all of your VPs, we're seeing all these things happen. If you change your investment mix this way, you could actually do more with less, and then that frees up budget to do these other things that we also want to do. You can highlight things before other people notice them. And if you can become that advisor, then you're not the office of no, then you're the office of how can we? And so that's really where you want to be. And that's true. We obviously used FP&A as an example, but that's true a lot in accounting too. How can we better support some compliance needs and some process needs while making things easier on customers to buy things? How can we better support the sales team and getting commissions out faster? How can we better support the sales team on new contracts and revenue? Where can we be flexible on these contracts? Where can we not? How is it a two-way partnership? When finance says no, are they saying no, not ever? Are they saying, no, we've just done this too much? Is there a balance in there where, hey, I'm okay with you giving out XYZ for free as long as you only do it 5 or 10% of the time. You can't do it 100% of the time. And that kind of partnership and two-way dialogue is really important. I think that's key to finance. I think that's been stressed even more lately with more companies going remote, where building those lines of communication with people outside your department is harder to do remote than it was when you're in office hanging out together. So I think there's a lot of different things in there.
You touched on something that we're going to go a lot deeper in later, which is how to have an effective discussion when there isn't a right answer and how to get through that. Are there any examples as you think back to your career of how you approach that? Because as a CEO or as a business leader myself, I mean, I love that. It's not about yes or no. It's about what is the best use of this capital to drive the sort of results that you need, which I think is very atypical in a finance org, and I like to see it growing. So I want to sort of instill this to listeners who might be either sitting in a seat right now where they're inheriting a reputation and they're trying to change a culture. How do you go about changing a culture from a no shop to let's be a partner shop?
Sure. I'll use an example I love. I came into Looker and, thankfully I came in, that was VP of FP&A role, and we had a great FP&A team there. So a lot of great talent. And I remember one of the top FP&A people came to me and said, "Oh, I'm so glad you're here. We've got this model and all the changes sales should make, but they're not listening to us. Well, you can now tell them to make these changes." And we're sitting there, I was like, "I don't think that's how it works." And I talked to this person who kind of, needed some of that guidance. Like, "Okay, well, take me through your model." And he took me through his model. And it's like, "Okay, well, your model says that'd be better. Is this how the business works?" And he's like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, you're telling the CRO to do this. Like, have you talked to each one of his VPs? Do they agree this is the right way to model the business? Do they agree this will be the outcome?" He's like, "No, we've just done all this internally." I was like, "Okay, go through and over the next month, go and talk to every single one of the CRO's VPs and get there and listen more than tell. Listen to how their business works. Change your model based on what they're telling you, and then come back." And, a month later came back and said, "Okay, well, my model is completely different now. We've got some new insights that are actually better." It's like, "Okay, now that you've got the support of all the VPs and your model, now go to the CRO. I'm not getting involved. Go to the CRO and see what the CRO says." And it was much better received. Now it wasn't a recommendation from one person's spreadsheet in Excel. It was a recommendation of his entire team. And so that kind of building, I say, like, one of the reasons I love finance is I love working with experts in their field. And if you actually want to work with people who are experts in their field, you got to be willing to listen and learn from them to add your piece into the overall puzzle. So that'd be my example where it was someone very talented and just need that guidance of, this is how you interact. This is how you influence the CRO. It's not just Excel, it's working with their whole team.
I think people often underestimate that a spreadsheet can tell a story, but gaining buy-in is a really important part about interacting with your colleagues, setting them up for success and setting the business up for success. You talked before about this concept of precision Q&A with your team. Can you tell us what that is and why it's so important?
Yeah, I think one of the fun things about being in finance and accounting is that you generally have, outside of customer data, you have the most access to data in the entire company. And so you can see everything, and you can see things that no one else can see. And the tricky part is when you get a question about something, your gut is to prove how much you know and answer it fully and completely. But most people don't want that. So an example, let's use variance analysis as an example. Understanding when someone asks you, "Hey, what was the quarter over quarter variance on this spend?" Let's say it's coming from myself. It's one, understanding the context. You should understand, if I'm asking that question, why do you think Razzak's asking that? Okay, well, it's a day before this meeting. He's probably asking because he wants the answer for that meeting. All right, now how do I answer this? There's 17 things that drove that variance. Do I list them all? No. So it's communicating concisely and saving people's time. "Hey, Razzak, most of this variance was driven by these 3 things. There's 14 other things that I can list if you're interested in." And giving that quick, concise answer so that people trust when they engage with you and ask a question, they're getting the meat of the question very quickly, and not a 10-page essay that took 3 weeks. And by then the answer doesn't even matter. So precision Q&A is really important. It's also important for the people asking questions, giving them the proper context and framework. So if I was asking that question, it probably would have been better if I said, "I want to know this because that's speaking to cost of goods sold, and I want to know that for my decision tomorrow on what we're doing on cost of goods sold."
I love this because it's also, I think, part of an important transition from working internally in finance to working with business partners, especially as people step into a role of CFO and working with CEOs, is there's lots of reasons why we're asking questions, but answering the question first, and then we can determine whether or not we need to go into the 17 other reasons. I find that a lot of people struggle with this. I struggle with giving this feedback. Any advice for me and the listeners? How do you build a culture where this happens? I think it's easier said than done.
Yeah, you had a great piece earlier on this talking about what confidence interval can I get with an answer right now versus, say, waiting for 100% confidence. I learned something really interesting at Apple. One of the sales VPs there made an interesting comment that stuck with me. And he said, anytime he gets an email from Tim Cook, if he can answer it in the first 5 minutes with a decent answer, it's good. Every hour he takes to answer it, he felt like the expectation was more and more. And so I think there's something to be said for a quick answer with 80% confidence and letting people know that, versus saying, if that's not good enough, let me know. I can spend 3 days on this and get you a 97% accurate answer.
Hey, we'll get back to the conversation in a moment after a word from our sponsors. There's a world where your CRM is powerful, easily configured, and deeply intuitive. Attio makes that a reality. Attio is a radically new CRM built specifically for the new era of companies. It's flexible, easily configures to your unique data structures, and works for any go-to-market motion from self-serve to sales-led. Attio automatically enriches your contacts, syncs your emails and calendar, lets you create powerful reports, and quickly build Zapier-style automations. The next era of companies deserves more than a one-size-fits-all CRM with an outdated UX. Join OpenAI, Replicate, 11 Labs, and more. Try Attio instantly at attio.com. That's attio.com.
And so building that context, sometimes it's explicit, telling people, hey, when I send you a quick question via the instant messaging application I use, whether that's Slack or Teams or something else, that means I want to answer in the next 30 minutes. If I send it via email, I want that answer in 24 hours, right? Or I want a reply saying this is a few weeks away. So building up that culture, it's certainly easier when there is, you have context and you already have those unwritten rules, but sometimes sitting down as a team and saying, hey guys, these are my expectations and you should understand this context based on how you get the question from myself. And this is how you should think about how our CEO acts when they send a question, they're expecting this. When our CRO sends a question, they're expecting this. And if you can communicate that, maybe not documented, but at least talk through it, it can save everybody a lot of wasted effort or missed opportunity where someone gets a question and they take 5 days to answer when that needed to be from the hip 15-minute answer.
I mean, it's I think fairly obvious for everybody listening why you got to the role of a CFO so early in your career. It's just great. But you do get there. So you land the role of CFO at FloQast. And so for any listeners who don't know and living under a rock, what is FloQast?
Absolutely. FloQast is an accounting operational platform where we automate people's workflows. And that's a long way to say we make the controller and GL accounting team's lives a whole lot easier, everybody involved with the close. And what's a little different for us is that we are by accountants for accountants. And so you immediately feel when you get into the application, this was a tool developed by someone who had been through the pain of close and is a former accountant and knows what the end user needs to get their job done faster and better. And that flows through everything we do. So we believe in working with your existing processes, whether that's your Box or your SharePoint or Excel or your Google Drive, and getting you up and running very quickly. And so, we are the antithesis of like, well, let's do a 1.5 year implementation to solve this in a very rigid way that if your business changes in 6 months, maybe that whole implementation plan goes out the window. And so I think that's really inspiring to me, is that I feel like this company, by accountants for accountants, is making accountants' everyday lives better, allowing them to use their accounting skill sets to spend more time on value driving problems as opposed to a bunch of time turning crank. And this is something I mentioned, hiring earlier is a superpower. I really believe, not just for myself, I believe hiring great people and retaining them and allowing them to do their best work is something that differentiates the great companies from the average companies. And if you hire great people and you make them do boring work, you're wasting their time and you're not going to be able to retain them and you're not going to get the right outcome. So forever elevating accounting is very important to myself and FloQast.
So they clearly thought that you were going to be a good fit for them. How do you evaluate when you're taking on your first sort of formal CFO role if they're a good fit for you?
Yeah, there was a lot of things I said no to till I found the perfect company for me with FloQast. And, I wish I could give you like a top three, but there's really about 7 or 8 things that are really important in the first CFO role. It's one of those things that you want to get right. And because it's a big step. And so it's everything from, believing and loving the product, talking to all the customers, hearing all the customers rave about how much they love the product, loving the management team and the culture was aligned with how I worked, seeing a business where they needed a CFO and I felt like I could immediately provide a lot of value in things that either they weren't doing or needed to build going forward. Shared vision on what success was. So the 3 investors in FloQast Series D were previously in Looker, my prior company. So we had a shared vision of what success looks like and how you get there. There's a bunch of other things happening. I think my conversations, I mentioned the great fit with the founders, but also, alignment on what they wanted out of a CFO. I think we can go into this more, but a lot of founders don't know what they want in the CFO because they've never had a CFO before. And so don't understand what a CFO can do and how they can enable their CFO. So alignment across the board, it really was perfect opportunity. Google was nothing but great to me, gave me a lot of, a lot of responsibility, a lot of reasons to stay around, but, FloQast was just the perfect opportunity.
That's awesome. So you step into the CFO role. The company had just closed a Series D, and you're about to make one of the first major decisions. So I want to talk a little about this because it is a really interesting one, and I am fascinated. So part of this podcast is about digging into how sort of founders and finance teams make key decisions with imperfect information. And so you step into this role, and something in your experience in the team leads you to the decision to turn down a financing round that would have doubled the company's valuation. This seems, I think, probably very counterintuitive to most listeners, myself included, to be honest, but it turns out it becomes the right decision for you guys. And so can you just shed some light on what are some of the debates that are happening behind the scenes, and how do you arrive at this decision?
Yeah, I think what a lot of people don't realize, or maybe they do, but is that almost all of growth funding for all rounds is predicated on value going up. And if the value always goes up, everything's fine. But the way everything's structured, if the value doesn't always go up, there's extreme pain. And so part of the CFO's job is to make sure that we have the right balance sheet. And so, might be thinking that more is always better. But ultimately, we sat down. We had just raised a Series D. We'd been blowing out our numbers in the back half of the year. Frankly, if we had raised a few months later, maybe we would have raised at that valuation. We had an opportunity to raise a lot more money at a much higher valuation than we had before. And we decided not to take it. And there were a couple of reasons behind it. First is that we had just raised enough money to execute our product and international expansion plans for the next year. And we felt like we were well positioned to execute on all those plans. So we'd be raising money to extend the runway from 2 years to maybe 4 or 5 years, which is a long time to sit on cash. We're that raised a bunch of money at the end of 21 and had that happen. And even if you don't spend it, I don't think people understand the pain of what happens when the valuation goes down. Now, let's just say you doubled your valuation. Your 409A probably went up, probably doubled. Now it's probably closer to your prior rounds. And if you want to hire people and they know valuations, multiples just got cut in half, and you say, hey, this equity you're granting me, like that strike price is like barely in the money, maybe not in the money. Like this equity is not worth as much as pot. So new hires, to bring in your new leaders and VPs, harder to bring them in if they know what's going on there. The existing employees are like, hey, my options aren't worth as much if my 409A is up here and 409A is lagging. It takes a while for it to catch up. Let's say you want to bring on more investors, right? Really hard to fit in a new investor if you're talking about a down round as opposed to an up round. You're pushing down the entire stack. Like it's a lot harder conversation. And so I think companies that have to go through knowing that their last round is higher than what they're worth have amazing organizational pain. It prevents them from hiring, retaining. It prevents them from executing. And so, who knows? I think I can say with certainty it was the right decision not to do that because we didn't have a plan. We didn't have a need to put a bunch of money to work in the next 12 months that we were raising. So that's how it worked out for us. But
there's always the temptation of the concept of just a cash war chest. I mean, there's entire VC funds like SoftBank, whose almost entire strategy is we're going to give you a war chest, and that helps ward off competition, gives you the opportunity when you do it. How do you have that discussion? Did you ever have the discussion at any point about like, well, I know all the rational reasons why we shouldn't and all the pain it could, but it's another $30 million. It's double the valuation. There's a bit of temptation there, no?
It was a lot more than 30s. I think there is a lot of temptation there. Like, hey, can we just go out and buy this market? I think in some cases that war chest and that buying that market makes sense. We just had a lot of confidence in us being able to execute with the money we just raised, and didn't feel like throwing an extra 100 million onto burn for the year would have as much impact as the crawl, walk, run. Put it that way. And sometimes money can't always buy running.
This is true. As I'm recovering from my hamstring injury, not admitting I'm too old to play soccer anymore. There's usually, from my perspective as a CEO and a serial founder, there's very rarely a shortage of ideas to fund. In fact, looking through recent press releases over the past couple of years, you guys hit a major milestone, 100 million in ARR. But along that way, you're actually launching a lot of new products along the way, and new products take time and money. So I want to kind of talk a little bit as a CFO. How do you think about the funding of new products?
Yeah, I think there's a natural desire for anybody with a finance background to over ROI every single thing. And so we take it a little bit more in a staged approach, right? So everything starts with overall strategy of how do we solve our customers' pain points. And so every kind of new product fits into that strategy. And when I say customer, we are focused on the office of the controller. So we're very, very focused in solving that team's pain points. And so initially it starts off with, is this product on strategy? Does it solve our product's pain point? Can we do it in a way that's better than everybody else, that makes more sense than everybody else? And then the question is, okay, can we actually do it? So it starts with a small engineering team to say, okay, get us a proof of concept that we can build something here and it'll be great. And that's normally in the investment bet category, not so much the ROI. I would say also there's some TAM analysis in there. Make sure this is, I think that's a key piece. Before we decide, is this a product or is this a feature? And so there are some things that are significant pain points where a controller says, yeah, there's a big pain point for me. And that's a product. That might have a very different analysis than, yeah, this is a pain point as part of my close process. And maybe that's more of a feature within close, or this is a pain point within my compliance process. And so when you look at that, like, we often talk more in terms of solutions versus products. So we have a closed solution, we have a compliance solution. They work really well together. And then within closed, we have multiple products that help with the closed solution. And then once they get to a point where, okay, we're ready to really ramp up this engineering team, we want to put a lot more resources on it. Then it gets a little bit more towards a separate P&L for that product. And okay, how many customers are out there? How many are we going to get? How many features do we need to release each quarter to unlock this much of the market? And so we can sell to that much more of the market. And how does that look over time? So I think it's staged. Initially, it's a little bit exploratory, maybe a person or two tinkering on something somewhere. Then, okay, this is on strategy, this is big enough. Let's ramp up a engineering pod or two to build something that can actually be used and sold. And okay, we've got traction here. Let's put a lot behind it. And those are kind of the three stages.
Fascinating. Because you guys launch. I mean, just looking at it's just workflow management, reconciliation management, compliance management, lots of CPA classes, variance analysis, all in the core product. Like a lot. When you're defining, so let's say if you go through and the teams put together some case studies and like, all right, the TAM is right. We think we have an opportunity. Our customers like it. It solves a problem. What are some of the early milestones that maybe unlock more capital? Are we talking, we're measuring revenue, we're measuring cash flow, we're measuring payback? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the important ones are actually even earlier than that. It's how many beta customers do you have using it, and are they actually getting value? And if we went back and tried to sell it to them, would they actually pay for it? That's the key thing. Like, is this a product or is this a feature? And so, whenever we've worked out hard at this, but I also think we're blessed and that we've got customers that love our product and want us to solve more problems within the office of the CFO. So they're always very willing to try new things that we're working on. So we engage with our customers early on that. But seeing where that product goes from there, are they using this because they like us so much, or are they using this because this is really solving something significant? And so we saw that with compliance. We saw like how much customers were using it, how much they want, how much it was solving a pain point that they had or they were growing into. And, it was obvious that we needed to put a lot of resources behind our compliance product because it was significant.
So a lot of people listening are managing finance teams or are founders that might be even inside of a company and incubating a new idea. How do you guys have an alignment around what payback sort of should be? And I say that in the way of, when you're an independently funded company outside of inside, you might have a pre-seed round, which is like, can you put together a team and a prototype? And then you have a seed round, which kind of goes to like, can you actually build it? Will people use it? And then you start getting into kind of different stages of product market fit, pricing market fit, growth. Do you think about that similarly inside? Is it different inside of a company than maybe externally?
I certainly think with a large company, you've got a little bit more leeway to let big problems breathe and get there. If you know that there's a solution, that's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you can be more committed to your bets because you've got a little bit of a war chest, you've got cash flows from other things, you've got an already existing sales team, so you can let them breathe. On the other hand, it's important internally to maintain that same sense of urgency that no, we need to ship. Like, the finance team and the product team and C-level, they want to see some results here. There's only so much playtime to experiment, and then eventually you got to ship something. And so that healthy tension of if we know there's something there, we can invest for a long time to make it happen, but it can't be rudderless, right? You gotta be learning something every single month and shipping something every single month to improve it and iterate on it. So we do a really good job of shipping and iterating and then figuring out like, hey, is this a full solution? Is this a product, or is this a platform feature that just makes everything else better? And all three are okay. There's nothing wrong. What's bad is if you find something that should just be a feature and you keep treating it like a solution. That's where the finance team needs to come in and say, hey, look, like, you've done great work. This is great, but this isn't something that customers are going to go out and pay $100,000 for. This is something that should just be part of the platform that makes everyone's lives better. And we should treat it that way.
Okay. So without revealing any confidential information, obviously, these things could probably go in one of three directions. We see this at least in general startups. Either it's just not working, or it might have learned something that creates a new opportunity that maybe has a better ROI along the way. There's this middle ground sometimes where it shows these signs of working. And those are actually a bit more of the dangerous ones because it's this continual drag on resources you're trying to iterate. And then it actually works maybe even better than anticipated. So again, not looking for any kind of like common information. How would you approach, I was just sitting in the role of a CFO. One of these three things are happening. How do you approach the conversation in each of these different situations?
Yeah, I think there's a great opportunity for partnership between sales, product, finance, and engineering on these because there's a lot of unknowns. And I think the temptation is often with products as they're growing, let's say that they get some traction and they still have say a lower ACV than what it needs to be a full business, right? It's early stage. And the temptation is to say, well, all these other businesses that are great started at this ACV and eventually got up there, right? So we will too. But you run into selection bias. Like, what about all the businesses that started at that ACV and stayed there forever and then eventually got acquired because they were just a feature, not a platform? So I think avoiding selection bias, but the collaboration is really important. Hitting clear milestones and having a plan of how you're going to get, I'll make up some numbers here, but let's say you believe it needs to be 100K ACV to really be a standalone product and you're currently at 20K. It's like, okay, how do you actually get there? And what is going to be the features or the integrations or the other things that unlock that level of solution for customers? It requires finance to push that, because finance is often the ones that want the 3 and 5 year plans, and forcing people to put pen and paper and say, okay, if this is going to be a $100 million business in 5 years, what does that actually look like? Like, is there any math where I get there? And if the math says I'm going to ship the same feature set, but a little more robust, and magically it's going to 5x in ACV and conversion rates are going to triple, then you kind of know, like, okay, well, maybe this is a feature, not a product. Or the great thing is when you see the opposite side of that, it's like, I haven't shipped half the stuff I need to build on this product and I'm winning deals, ACVs are going, like, we found something here. So the second one's always better. But as I said earlier, it's the discipline to be able to say, okay, like, which track is this on, right? Like, how does this best serve our customers' needs? Is it a part of another solution? Is it a standalone solution, or is it a feature across the entire platform?
You brought up a really interesting point, which is, maybe it is kind of valuable, but it can't take off on its own. And then maybe you can just roll it into your current feature, and maybe that helps with renegotiation for higher renewal fees or continued investment in the product, which is, I think, an avenue I didn't quite appreciate before in internal incubation. I like that.
That's certainly a mistake that we're tempted in finance to want to monetize every single thing, and certainly do. And sometimes you just got to say, look, if we don't monetize this and we just put it as a feature in the platform, now all our future products can just integrate. Like, it allows the engineering team, the product team, to build a whole bunch more cool stuff if they know every single customer is going to have that access to that. So that's the internal, I wouldn't say debate, but collaboration across product engineering, sales, and finance on those things.
I really appreciate a comment you made where even at the beginning and you're thinking about something, what are the milestones to success? And can you squint your eyes strong enough to make the math work? Because there's a lot of internal innovation, even actually venture-backed companies, where you can't squint at all to make the math just will never work. I like that idea of this finance partnership really early in the days, even potentially before you allocate full-time resources and capital towards something, is, can I just make the numbers work? All right. As we look back now on your career, what advice do you give to future CFOs? And what is one underrated skill that you think people should work on more?
Well, I'm biased with the two things I said earlier: hire and retain great people, and know how to partner, advise, and influence. I think a lot of people envision the CFO as just telling everybody what to do, but the job is a whole lot easier if you're, all rowing in the same direction. It can be more influence and decision making through agreed upon structures rather than explicit. So this is the first goal. Let's all work towards that. That other goal is not in the top 3. Like, if we miss the top 3, I don't care about those other ones. So the top 3 are the top 3. And that helps everybody kind of row in the same direction, and you get more decentralized decision making. But I think my advice for people earlier in their career, obviously the first part, like becoming the trusted advisor. If you work cross-functionally and you prove that you can not only understand and do your job, but help everybody else do theirs in a finance and accounting way, you're going to see your career go really quick. You're going to have multiple people across the company telling you, this person's awesome, you got to promote him or her. I want this person working on my next project. It'll be extremely easy for your management chain to give you more responsibility and promote you in your career. The other piece of advice, and it's so much easier to say this when I'm in this position now, so I totally understand. Don't always chase the money. As it's hard to say, but I'll just tell you, I remember my first job making 35 grand a year. When I got that first raise, I went from zero disposable income to some disposable income, and it was life changing. So I understand the cash needs. But that said, if you can be okay between two different salaries, choose the company that's the best company, that's going to have the most growth, with the best team to learn from, that's going to give you the most opportunity to grow your skill sets. And down the road, that's going to be way more valuable than an extra 5 or 10K in the short term. And so, if you need the money, obviously everybody's got to make ends meet. But when you can make ends meet and you can debate between two offers, definitely wait going to a great company. I'll tell you, many people when they're hiring, there's this idea that you can find the diamond in the rough, that one great candidate who happened to be at a terrible company, which is true. But the reality is companies are getting thousands of resumes for every single open position. You got to narrow those down. And the first thing people do is kind of just look for who is at great companies, because the odds are they learned the right way to do things at great companies. It's not fair. It's not right. But you're asking my opinion, like, go to the company that's the top quartile in that growth portfolio. Go to that Apple or Google. Go to those companies where you're going to learn great things. So
awesome. And then last question before we go. One of the important parts and the themes through this is being able to have trust with your colleagues in order to have decisions where there is no right answer. Any tips for a CFO stepping into a new role on how you build trust with your CEO?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if I thought about that explicitly coming into the role and building trust with the CEO. I just know what I knew I had to do. So I instantly knew what I wanted to do was help him execute his vision, understand the areas where I thought I could provide unique value to the company. And so at FloQast, one of those things was I came in and I said, okay, we're getting pretty big now. We've got a lot of different teams. We got to make sure we're all rowing in the same direction, even if it's unintentionally different directions. And so we set up, quarterly business reviews each quarter with all of the C-level, a lot of the executive team and individual teams to go through what's going on. And just hearing what everyone was doing and providing cross-functional feedback was really powerful. And then that evolved into, okay, we've got some initiatives that are like truly cross-functional. Let's change this whole thing. Forget having sales present, finance present, marketing present, each one go through. Let's talk about one of our new products, compliance. Let's get everybody in the room. Let's just talk about compliance. What's engineering seeing? What's sales seeing? What's marketing seeing? What's finance seeing? What's product seeing? And driving the company that we're all rowing in the same direction. We also know who's rowing and how they're rowing. That communication path was important. And so I think, just finding ways to provide value and help the CEO execute their vision, and the trust will be there. There's some art to it, knowing when to just make a call and when to escalate and say, hey, actually, I think you need to make the call. And this one's a little bit more art than science. And if you ever make a mistake there, generally, that's just the learning of building a new relationship. But I just say add value and the trust will come.
I mean, coming from my perspective, I love that. And I like the either no, but, or this is a good idea, acknowledging this idea. But let's think about some other ways in which you could potentially execute that. And it really starts facilitating a really important and healthy conversation. This has been super insightful. Thank you for your time and all this knowledge. Anything that you want to promote or share with the audience?
Let's see here. The biggest thing, I'm going back to hiring. I think in hiring, hire great people, give them what they need to do great work, knock down roadblocks for them. And I think that's true for everything from manager to the CFO level. And for founders out there that are looking to hire maybe their first CFO, maybe they've never had a finance business partner before. They're a young founder that didn't work in a big company where they were a VP and had a dedicated finance business partner. figure out what you want. First of all, listen to what CFOs can do, and then figure out which type of CFO you really want, right? Do you want I think a lot of times founders, their only experience has kind of been with outsourced accounting services. And so, listen to your board members, have them talk to a million different CFOs, figure out what they're doing and what value, and figure out what you think your company needs, which type of one will drive most value. So those would be the two things I'd throw out into the world.
I love it. I imagine you're going to have a lot new signups from finance teams wanting to use FloQast with the presentation that, and probably a lot of applications of some finance people who want to learn.
They'll be very happy if they do. Very high customer satisfaction.
Yeah, I can imagine exactly why. What a great episode. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and all your knowledge.
Thanks, Sasha. Loved being here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Thanks for tuning in to Turpentine Finance. Share it with your executive team, direct reports, friends, and family. And if you want to support the show, the best ways are to leave a review wherever you're listening and subscribe. Turpentine Finance is part of Turpentine, the podcast network behind Moment of Zen, Turpentine DC, Age of Miracles, and more. Shows for experts by experts in tech.